If you believe what I said is wrong, I'll give you my whole website. The article had a picture of me, and it said, this is the last time you're going to ever see a picture of this clown. That was kind of the beginning of the Einstein of Wall Street idea. He literally showed up on the floor the next day with an 8-foot $100 bill. Hey everybody, it's me, Einstein of Wall Street here. Let's talk about the brand. We're going to talk about how the whole Einstein of Wall Street thing started. So, I was already doing some videos on the floor, this is kind of a breakout how the whole Einstein of Wall Street thing happened and how I became like a speaker and a writer and all this stuff. You know, how my role changed from being just a broker to basically creating this sort of social media persona. And, it happened, it was a couple of different things. One of the things was a guy named Jeremy Olsen, who was the editor of MarketWatch magazine, came out with an article, and the article had a picture of me, and it said, this is the last time you're going to ever see a picture of this clown on my website. And MarketWatch is a massive website. And he proceeded to just rip the floor apart and talk that we were a bunch of fantasy football idiots and that the floor was taken over by computers. And I took real offense to it because, this place means the world to me and I'm the ambassador of it. And I got really, really angry. And I'd never really written anything since basically college. I've written, unfortunately, many obituaries and I'm a really good writer. But I had never written anything about like that. And so I wrote something that was probably, 5 pages long, and I, in detail, talked about everything that he attacked, and I knocked down every one of his accusations and whatnot. And I sent it to him, and, happily, he responded, and he said, you know what? I was not right in saying the things I said, and I'm willing to give you, if you believe what I said is wrong, I'll give you my whole website, which is a massive website. It's got millions of people watching it. To tell your side of the story. And so I wrote this thing up and he printed it and it went viral. It got 10 million views. And basically I ended up apologizing and he said, you know what? I said, well, somebody must have shit in your Cheerios this morning because this doesn't seem like this whole anger thing came out of nowhere. And it turned out that he had not been invited or not been let into the Alibaba IPO, and he got sort of angry and he got his knickers in a row over it, and then he decided to rip the floor apart. There are floor haters. Peter Gasparino is one of them, and who think the floor is a non-event and all that. But those people are really full of shit. The floor is more relevant than ever before. It is not by any means a bunch of fantasy football, a bunch of uneducated idiots. We are one of the most philanthropic, amazing group of human beings that has ever walked this friggin' earth. All that being said, that was sort of the beginning of one thing. Then I used to do interviews with a company called Inside Verso, the German a media company, and I used to do interviews. There was a guy named Manuel Koch on the floor. He was a German reporter, and we used to do interviews all the time. And we probably for a year, every day we'd do a market wrap-up, and that kind of got me into talking on video. I had never really done that. And I had never been on social media, and I'm not sure which came first, the chicken or the egg, but he ended up leaving the floor, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to grab the ball on this thing, and I'm going to start making videos. And so I kind of did it with a little tongue-in-cheek. My mother spoke 14 languages, so I grew up being able to speak in many, many different accents. I speak a few languages, but accents are one of my specialties. And so I started doing market wrap-ups with different accents, especially German. And then I would send them over to Europe, and they went viral. Everybody loved them. And then I started dressing up, as like an old professor with a lab coat and all this stuff. It became sort of fun. You can see it on YouTube. It's pretty funny. And that was kind of the beginning of the Einstein of Wall Street idea. I was nicknamed Einstein by Erin Burnett. Erin Burnett and Mark Haynes, who has passed away, were the two reporters on the floor back in the day before anybody else was on the floor. And Mark Haynes passed away. Erin ended up going over to CNN, where I have had a show for the last year and change. She nicknamed me Einstein. And Mark Haynes used to sit outside on the Johnny Pump outside the exchange every morning, smoking a cigarette. And he would say that he gauged the market by how my hair was. I would walk by him every morning on the way to work, and he'd go, you know what, Einstein, you're having a good hair day, market's going to be up. And it turned out it was literally 1 for 1. Every time my hair looked good, market was up. But anyway, she named me the Einstein of Wall Street, and then she named me Einstein right? And obviously it's because of the hair. It's not because I'm that smart. And then I have to admit, there's a woman who started my first website. I've never given her any kudos for this thing, and I don't really want to, but she is the one. She will remain nameless because she's a bit off the fucking rails. But she actually was the one who actually called me the Einstein of Wall Street, and that's how we built my website. Now, how did the brand start? So Einstein of Wall Street became my name. I opened up an account on Instagram and on Twitter, Einstein of Wall Street. But the whole thing sort of morphed into this thing, and it started by when, first of all, what ended up happening was Richard Drew, famous photographer, known for The Falling Man. He's an Associated Press photographer for 40 plus years. He's the one who kind of made me famous. He was the one who took one of the first photos of me. My whole history in photos started when it was one of the first crash days, and there was a guy named Alan Dershowitz who was a broker on the floor who was retiring, and he decided he was called the market dude, and he was going to pass the buck to me as the guy who they took pictures of whenever they were on Wall Street. And so I accepted that role. A couple of days later, market crashed 600 points, and they let a couple of reporters on the floor, and I had a picture of me throwing my hands in the air. It was April 17th. 2007, and the market was down 600 points, and it got on the front page of the Daily News, and then it just kind of went viral, and the Einstein of Wall Street, this and that. The next day, the New York Post wrote an article about the photo and about who is that man behind that photo. Because over the last couple of months back then, I was on 1,000 front pages. There's a thing called Newseum. It's a website that shows front pages of all the newspapers across America. And I was tracking about 1,000 front pages a day for a while there. So Richard Drew, the Getty photographer, Brendan McDermott, a lot of these photographers knew that if they took a picture of me, it was going to get press. So I became known as the most photographed man on Wall Street. And that also came with a Buzzfeed article that came out about me, where they tracked me from home down to the stock exchange. There were so many different things that helped build the brand. George Lopez, comedian, came down to the floor. He had a show on A&E called Very Superstitious. Everyone had heard I was a very superstitious guy. I was on the show. You could see it on the internet. It was called, it was an A&E, Very Superstitious, George Lopez, what do you call it? Episode, and that was kind of cool because he was there the day that my son Benny signed the book to get his seat, and it was a very funny moment. It's definitely worth seeing. So, were you around for that? You weren't here yet.
That was before.
And then, so I became the most photographed guy, but I wasn't saying anything. Then the MarketWatch thing came out. I'm not sure the timeline on all that. And then they started putting me on the front pages everywhere. And then I became the face of Wall Street and the most photographed guy on Wall Street and all that. And then one day I received an email from a guy named Albino. Albino is a Iraqi vet. I believe he was in the Navy, and I believe he was an animator and an illustrator, and I believe he suffers from PTSD, and he was sort of constrained into his home. He couldn't really leave the house, and I guess he had been following me on social media, and he was kind of intrigued by my personality and my look, and he actually drew this guy, and he sent it to me in a PDF. With the hat on and the cap, and it became my brand. It became my character, and immediately I'm a lover of merchandise. I'm a lover of brands, marketing. If I wasn't a broker, I would have been in branding and marketing. It's my happy place. I love logos. I love all that kind of stuff. And so he sends this to me, and I was like, wow, what is this? And he goes, you know what? I follow you. I think you're great, and I just want you to have it. It's a gift from me to you. And I said, well, wow, man, I love it. Everybody loves it. And it just went viral. I started printing the picture and putting it on T-shirts and hats and printing emblems and patches everywhere. I went absolutely bat crazy over it. We made Nike sneakers with it. We did everything. And that in coordination with the Einstein of Wall Street became my brand, the Einstein of Wall Street plus this character. And that's kind of how this whole thing happened. Then I got Instagram, and I started small. I had, 8,000 followers. I think I'm not sure when I brought in Andrew Michaels, he had 8 or 10 or 20,000 followers. And then what ended up happening was, the way the story goes is that, Instagram, the way Instagram works is they'll put you in touch with, they'll suggest people who you would like based on what things you watch. And so for me, I watched finance and I watched art, because I love art. I love pop art, Andy Warhol, stuff like that. And so they started sending me these posts and putting me, with a guy named Mr. E, a guy named King Saladin, all these young artists whose art related to money sort of came into my feed. And I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know you could contact them or whatever. But the first guy was Mr. E. Mr. E is an artist pop artist from Miami, who makes everything is around the giant $100 bill. And so the first thing it was like, oh my God, I love this guy. And so I DM'd him. I said, how do I get in touch with this guy? Someone said, you can send a DM. I send him a DM saying, I don't know if you know who I am, but I love your stuff. And my next thing I know, my phone rings. And I said, who is this? And he goes, this is Evan Rosen. My name's Mr. E. I'm the artist that you said you really liked. I said, dude, I love your stuff. And we started chatting, and he goes, I'm hopping on a plane. I'll be in New York tomorrow. I said, okay, go for it. He literally showed up on the floor the next day with an 8-foot $100 bill. We ended up getting on CNBC. It went viral. It was amazing. And that sort of started my thing. I started doing a whole art thing. Right, I brought in King Saladin, who I met on Instagram. It turns out he was best friends with Mr. E. And then all these other artists sort of kept coming into my world. It turned out they all knew each other. Their art related to finance and money. Then I had an epiphany. I said, you know what? The stock exchange was listing Twitter. It was listing Snapchat. It was kind of reinventing itself, a little more modern and involving social media. And I thought, how cool would it be? All the art in this building are like etchings of Alexander Hamilton. It's all old school stuff. And I said, well, how about if they just gave me a wall where I could put up some of this cool art? So I went to the stock exchange. I went to the head of communications and to the head of archives, a man named Peter Ash, and a guy named Josh King. And I said, guys, look, I have this idea. It's kind of super cool. Do you think you could give me like one wall on the 6th or 7th floor where I could put up some cool modern art that relates to finance? And I did not think they were going to go for it. And it turned out Josh King loved Mr. E. He ended up buying a piece. And that started the gallery. Big Board Art Hall was born that day. And they not only gave me one wall, they gave me the whole corridor from the elevator to the boardroom. Now, everyone needs to understand the boardroom is the place modeled after Versailles. The ceiling is made of Tiffany glass, and there's a one-of-a-kind, what's the urn? Who makes the urn? The urn, what?
It's the Russians.
Yeah, no, the Russians made the urn, but it's called the egg. I'm blocking on it. There's a thing called the something egg. Here, hold on. The Russian egg. The Russian egg. Hold it. Russian egg. Oh, I'm looking at fucking emails here. Russian egg. Fabergé. Russian Fabergé egg. There's a one-of-a-kind Russian Fabergé urn upstairs. And so they gave me the whole corridor from the elevator to, which is a long corridor, and they said, you know what, Pete, you can curate a gallery up here if you want. And now I was off to the races. I put together a show. We had a big opening. All the artists came with their families. It was written up all over the place that it's this incredibly cool, exclusive gallery on the 6th floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Called the Big Board Art Hall, curated by Peter Tuchman. I had never curated anything in my life. I ended up putting on an art show in Soho, which absolutely blew away the whole art industry. I had never done that before. We closed down Soho. 800 people, sold out show. There were wrapped McLarens with art all over the place, and it was amazing. So all these things are sort of happening in really fast time here, right? Like putting together the gallery. I mean, none of it happened overnight. Probably took a year to put the gallery together. It took about 3 weeks to put the art show together at the AFA Gallery with Heidi Leith. It was amazing. And then And as all of this was going on, I maintained that Einstein of Wall Street brand and that character, and then look, one of the great ways to make something like that happen is to do merchandise and spread the word and social media and all that. And so my social media started to grow, and my page was called the Einstein of Wall Street. I took on that name, and that's kind of how that was the beginning of the path. It's a longer story. I got to go.